You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, hello. All right, my guest today is the fabulous Kaitlin Cuevas. Kaitlin is the owner and founder of Think Happy Co. Under the Think Happy Co. umbrella, Kaitlin hosts a podcast, offers coaching services, and has written a book answering the question that she receives all the time of, how are you so happy all the time? Kaitlin is a lover of French roast coffee, golden doodles, and pump-up music. She believes happiness is something we each create for ourselves and that you are in the driver's seat of your own life. Outside of work, she's a mom to Eleanor, wife to Oakley, dog mom to Guppy, and is expecting baby number 2. All right, so this episode is jam-packed with actionable tools to help us, quote-unquote, think happy. And yes, if you're wondering, I do ask her thoughts on toxic positivity and what being happy means. So, Kaitlin walks me through the Think Happy signature pillars, her habits for happiness, the power of journaling and doing the inner work. She defines what wasted time is, how to recognize it in your life, and reallocate the time appropriately. And overall, we just have a lot of fun. I love her. All right, here's Kaitlin. Hey, Kaitlin. Thank you so much for being here with me. It's so nice to meet you.
Oh my gosh, I know. Thank you for having me. I have just a huge smile on my face right now. I'm so excited for our conversation.
I know. I think we see eye to eye on a lot of things and we're going to get into it. So
yes, let's do it.
Yeah. So your platform, everything is Think Happy.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? What's happiness mean to you?
Yeah, that's such a good question because, happiness is just such a regular word, right? And I think that it means something different to different people. Mm-hmm. So to me, happiness really just boils down to being an intentional mindset where you're continually taking care of both your physical body and also your emotional heart and mind. And I've found, and I feel like your listeners will probably be like, yeah, that's true. I've found that a lot of time as a result of that, leading by that sort of example tends to make other people around you want to strive for that same thing. So yeah, just an intentional mindset and taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously your business exists for a reason. Is that something that you struggled with, or why start this?
Yeah, no, that's such a good follow-up question. So let's backtrack to a couple years ago. So before I started my business, I wrote a book that's called Think Happy. So I'm really not very creative with thinking of names for things. Some people will call that branding, which if I'm being kind to myself, it's just great branding. So I wrote a book called Think Happy, and the idea for my book started when I realized people kept asking me the same question just over and over. And that question was, how are you always so happy? And the truth is, it's not that I'm always, quote unquote, so happy, but I do put forth this continual and intentional effort to live a happy life. So now fast forward a couple years to present day, that mentality has just morphed into the mission for all that I do with Think Happy Co.,
Mm-hmm.
which is just to, teach women intentional and proactive methods to help them reclaim and ultimately sustain their personal happiness.
Yeah. It does seem that just from the short conversations that we've had prior to hitting record, that it would surprise me if it wasn't some part of your personality as well. Like you just have that sort of energy that's very warm and
Oh,
upbeat, and I don't know you very well, obviously, but it would surprise me already to try and picture you as not happy.
oh, and that is just so nice of you to say. But honestly, it helps when you're having a conversation with someone who, has similar vibes as that.
That's
So
well,
kudos
thank
to you
you.
also.
Well, aren't
Yeah,
we just so fabulous?
we are. We really are.
It's so funny because I don't think of myself that way at all. Like, I don't think of myself as a generally happy person, and I think that would surprise people that know me. It's like, I don't
That
know,
is
that
interesting.
whole,
Yeah.
yeah, that just the vibe that you have is like not how I see myself. But anyway, that's not the point of this.
Well, I will tell you. So for the listeners, this is a little comical. So I do have my own show too, but this is only the second time I've been a guest on someone else's show.
Mhm.
And so you were just so patient with me as I asked like all of my bajillions of questions. And you guys, literally leading up to this, we were emailing and I was like, oh, wait, shoot, I got to download Skype. I'm so sorry. And I mean, you are just so easy to ask those questions to. And I mean, you're great,
Thank you.
is the
Thank you.
moral of what I'm saying.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So, give us some examples maybe of whether they're from your book or just in your everyday life of people constantly asking you, how are you always so happy? Like, how are you always so happy? What are some of the things that you say to people when you answer that question? Or what are some of the things that you do regularly to set that intention and exude what you do?
Yeah. So I feel like there's kind of two ways that I can answer that question. Um, so first I'll tell you just like about the reflection that I did before
Okay.
I sat down and wrote my book.
Hmm.
And then don't let me forget to tell you the second part, which is just like some of the habits that I have for my own life.
Okay.
So, Think Happy Co. has 5 signature pillars. And like it sounds all fancy and stuff, but if you know me, like I'm not fancy. and so so when I sat down to write my book and ultimately just tackle that question, how are you always so happy? It started with a lot of self-reflection. And then these 5 pillars are totally a result of that reflection. They are time management, taking care of your body, taking care of your heart, loving yourself, and setting and achieving attainable goals. So, those were really the 5 things that I was able to identify that, like, okay, I think each of these 5 things are reasons that I'm able to live this quote happy life.
Hmm.
And so I can give you like a little overview of what each pillar is if you want.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, great. So first, time management. So learning how to utilize your time management, I think, helps you to better and more productively use your time. And then also it helps you create time to fill yourself back up, which especially as women and moms, filling ourselves back up is something that frequently gets put to the back burner.
Hmm. Hmm.
Next, so taking care of your body covers things just like healthy and intentional eating, movement, sleep, things like that. Really just the basics. And then building on that, taking care of your heart, the third pillar, digs into topics such as external influences. So, what I mean by that is who and what you're surrounding yourself with. So, the people that you're hanging out with, the accounts that you're following on Instagram, things like that. Just making sure that those external influences are lifting you up and, encouraging you and supporting you on your journey to be the person that you want to be and not detracting from that. Fourth pillar, loving yourself. This is the pillar that probably requires the most deep thinking work, if you will. And it's just a lot about digging into who you are at your core, in the bottom of your heart, who you are, and learning to truly love that part of yourself. And then last but not least, setting and achieving attainable goals. I mean, pretty self-explanatory there. I'm an avid goal setter. I totally nerd out on helping others create goals and design a plan of action, and then ultimately execute that plan of action until they cross their finish line of whatever the goal is. So that's that. Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like, based on the second part of what you wanted to answer with the habits, that we'll kind of be able to explore these a little further. But before we do that, I want to take you back to, the self-reflection period for you. What did that look like? I feel like if someone had said to me a year, 2 years ago, you're going to go through a time of deep self-reflection, I would have been like, picturing myself sitting cross-legged staring at a window, like someone who's not feeling like they've done this before, or they want to, or they're not even realizing that that's what they're doing. Like, what did it look like for you?
A lot of early mornings, which I will say early mornings are like my optimal time of creativity and just productivity. So it looked like a lot of early mornings, a lot of cups of coffee, and literally pen to paper. And then once I got to the point where I realized that I was going to put it into a book form, I started transitioning just, to typing things up. But I love journaling. When I was, let's see here, this was probably 10 years ago, I set a New Year's resolution to start journaling again. When I was growing up, in elementary school and middle school, maybe even in high school, I used to always have a diary. And so probably about 10 years ago, I was like, you know what? I need to start doing that again. And so having those times of self-reflection is kind of like a muscle that I am constantly working, just because I do keep up with my journal a couple times a week. But yeah, I mean, that's truly what the self-reflection looked like. It started pen to paper, with a lot of coffee.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, interviewing a lot of therapists and women who are sharing mental health journeys, like, journaling is a very commonly used coping mechanism for anxiety, for depression, for just expression. I too used to keep diaries and journals. I have to tell you though, as an adult, I found that I so overthought it that I had to be done with it. And now hearing you talk, I'm like, maybe I could do it again. Did you just open it and this might sound like a dumb question, but what did you write? Those first few weeks, especially before you're really in a groove, blank sheet of paper. What are you writing down?
Okay, so I'm literally about to just spit out the water I just took a sip of, because I also reread my old journal entries. Okay. So I can tell you almost verbatim what that first journal entry said.
That's amazing.
And it was so dramatic.
That's so good.
So my husband and I had gotten into an argument or something. And I went outside with an empty journal, and I sat down and I opened it up to the first page, and I'm pretty sure I wrote as I sit here writing this, the clouds are rolling over.
Oh
And
my
then I
God.
kid you not, it started sprinkling outside and like a raindrop landed on some of the ink that I had already written
Oh my
and like
God.
it smudged the ink. And so then I'm writing like these raindrops are just a reflection of the tears.
Oh my God. I am obsessed with you sharing this right now. I'm loving this. This is so
Oh
good.
my gosh. It was so dramatic. And that's not what my journal entries look like anymore.
It's so good.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was just, prime time. Really,
It sounds
really
like
just
a music video.
yes. I am sure. So we lived in an apartment complex and I was sitting like at the pool area. And so there were like hundreds of other apartments that like looked out over the pool. And so I'm sure that like whoever got a glimpse of me that day was like, oh man, like what's going on with that girl? She's sitting in the rain.
Oh my God, that's so precious. That's so good. Oh, my cheeks hurt.
Oh, mine too.
Oh
Mine
my
too.
goodness. All right, so what are they more like now? Is it like
Yeah.
a little bit more structured or less structured or just random
Not
thoughts?
structured
Like,
at all.
okay.
So I use journaling just that, like, I feel like I use it as a tool for different things in different seasons of life.
Okay.
And so sometimes I'm literally just writing about, like things I've been doing the last few days and just to have, a record of small things that, maybe you didn't post about on Instagram that, weren't like noteworthy enough for social media, but I still want to remember them. Um, so sometimes like that's literally just what my entries are about, like
Okay.
a recap of my weekend. Other times, I so when I first started or when I first identified that I had anxiety, I had been feeling it for a long time, but I didn't realize it was anxiety. I was talking to my OB about it, and she had suggested starting to journal and noting like what I was feeling and where I was in that part of my cycle. And that that blew my mind because then I had, like after 3 months or something, I would go back and read that each month I would feel the same way, excuse me, at the same part of my cycle. And it was just eye-opening.
Yeah.
So I like using it as a tool like that for also. So yeah, not a lot of structure. I would say the main thing that's structured is just the consistency of it. It's not so much what I write. It's just that I take that time to write.
Okay. I appreciate you going through that because, like I
course.
said, I hear it all the time and it's not something that I do as an adult. And yeah, like it's just good to know what other people are doing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I
Absolutely.
experience the same with my cycle and anxiety. And yeah, it's pretty amazing actually what you can find out when you're paying attention and taking note.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you, last week I interviewed a primary care physician, and our episode was all about self-care. And she started talking about the science behind like having anxiety, and it was so validating to me. Just, she was like, there is science that shows that like you're going to feel like your heart is racing. And then as a result of that, you're going to feel the shortness of breath. You might think, am I getting enough air? And it's just going to snowball. And then you'll feel the tingling in your fingers and sometimes in your mouth. And as she was saying that, I was just like, oh my gosh, I literally for all these years have just thought that I was the only one who had feelings like that. But there's science behind it. It made me feel, I don't want to say that like I needed to be validated in my anxiety, but it felt good.
You felt
to
seen.
Hear that.
You felt
Exactly.
understood. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It always helps to have, at least for me, I'm the same. Like, I had postpartum depression and feeling all those feelings. to then one day finally be able to say out loud, this is depression, actually made it less scary because I knew what it was. And then it was like, okay, so what do I do about it now?
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Before some people don't like labels, and to each their own. To me, the label helps me identify it and then deal with it, and
I agree.
And that's, and I don't feel, I did at one point, but I've gotten to a point where I don't feel shame in saying that either. I don't feel shame in saying I experience depression, anxiety, and I think unfortunately a lot of people do, a lot of women do, especially after they've had a baby, because there's so many feelings and emotions and hormones, and
the world tells you you're just supposed to be on cloud 9.
Exactly. And it's the best thing that ever happened to you.
It's tough. Yeah.
All right, so go back to the habits now. What are some of the clear-cut habits? Because I could go down that other tangent all day, but I want to make sure I get the habits.
Okay, so journaling is definitely one of them. And I also touched on this also. Mornings are just like my time to shine. And so having quiet mornings before my husband's awake, before my daughter's awake, just that is when I have my me time. And that time really just helps set the tone for the day ahead. So that's another habit that I have.
What time do you wake up?
Most of the time I'm up by 5 or 5:15.
Oh, and what time do you go to bed?
Oh gosh, girl, so early.
Really?
Usually like around 9 or 9:30.
Yeah, this is like the life I want, but I don't have. I can't do it. I mean, I can't do it.
You totally could. It would just take like a lot of baby steps to just like slowly build to it.
Okay. All right. So keep going. Yes. Mornings, journaling.
Yes, mornings, journaling. This one's going to fall into the journaling realm. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to start a small gratitude journal. And it is so simple. Each night, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. Some nights, it's like my bed, my pajamas, and my pillow. But other nights, it's like I'm not as exhausted, and I'm like, watching Ellie walk around, like taking her first few steps, or just it's a great way to end out the night. Instead of sitting there scrolling my phone and just I have a small little notebook that just sits on my nightstand, and I'll grab it, write down my 3 things, and then turn out the light. And then the final habit that I have is just being consistent with movement. And what I mean with movement, I consider it kind of like a catch-all for working out and exercising, whatever you want to call it, just some sort of intentional movement of your body. That is huge, a huge thing for me in my life that definitely helps with my happiness.
What do you like to do when it comes to movement? I'm really like just asking you to break down your entire life.
No, I love it. I am here for it. So I teach cycling. I teach rhythm-based cycling and this jump class. It's like on these individual trampolines. It's a cardio class. It is way too much fun. It's also going to kick your booty, but it's so fun.
That's so great. And you teach them.
I do. And I also teach bar and HIIT classes.
Oh my God.
So those are really the things I love. I love going on walks just around our neighborhood. I have a love-hate relationship with running. Right now, we're definitely like on the hate side of our relationship. But I have done a couple marathons and a handful of half marathons and stuff like that. So
yeah, your goals, okay?
Oh
like just you like, oh my God. All right. So hold on. I have to go back to the early thing now, knowing all this. Were you always a morning person?
I was.
Okay.
That was kind of inadvertently ingrained in me. When I was in high school, I was on swim team and I played water polo, and our practices were before school.
Yeah.
So I feel like, really in high school, I just got in the habit of always waking up at 5 or 5:30 so I could be in the pool at 6.
Yeah.
And so.
And it stuck.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
stuck.
That honestly makes me feel a little better. Oh my goodness. Okay. So all right. So you mentioned it and you said it casually and I'm going to like take it and just exploit it now, but
Yeah.
the gratitude journal instead of scrolling, like, is scrolling what you would consider wasted time? Like, what is wasted time for you?
Oh man, that is such a good question. And like I feel like I should be like putting out big warning signs right
Mm-hmm.
now because I could talk about this for so long.
Okay. Well,
But
go.
I'm gonna stick
Yeah.
to the high points.
Okay. Okay.
And also, if your listeners want more on this topic as a whole about wasted time, I have a workshop that is called the Regain and Reallocate Wasted Time Workshop. And I'll leave them with a 20% off discount code that they can use if they're interested in it. And we'll
Amazing.
just use code SASS.
Awesome.
SASS. Yeah, for
Love
that
it.
20% discount.
That's
So,
awesome. Thank you so much. I will put that in the
oh
show
my
notes too.
gosh, of course, absolutely. So wasted time, okay? In a nutshell, wasted time is pretty much just time that you spend doing something that's either not productive or that doesn't serve you. And I feel like the thing with wasted time is that it's actually going to vary from person to person. So, yes, it can absolutely come in the form of just scrolling on your phone, whether it's Pinterest or Instagram or whichever that app is that you unconsciously click on. It could be binge watching TV, or it could be doing one task multiple times when really it just needs to be done once. Like if you've ever, this is an example that I like for this. If you've ever done a load of laundry and then like not gone back in to put it in the dryer, and then you end up having to redo that load of laundry because you're like, oh gosh, now this smells, and why didn't I just do it right the first time?
Or
So
even leaving it in the dryer to the point where it's so wrinkly, and then you have to do the refresh, and then I forget about the refresh, and I gotta refresh the refresh.
It is. Oh man, that is a cycle that I just hate getting into.
Brutal.
And it's so easy to get sucked into it.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a form of wasted time. Or another example that I like that I think that would get overlooked is if you spend time just walking back and forth from like one area of your house to another just because you don't have certain items laid out optimally for you for how like you live your daily life. So maybe, I mean, this is going to be a really elementary example, but maybe at your island is where you open up all of your mail, but then you keep like your mail opener in another part of your house, on your desk or something like that. And you're constantly walking from the island to your desk to grab the mail opener or the envelope opener, back to the island, stuff like that, where just making something a little more optimized could help save you time in the long run. Or even the last example I'll give, which is a vice to many of us, just pressing snooze in the morning. Each time you press snooze is another 9 minutes. Right? Isn't that crazy?
It is. Oh, it's so hard though.
It's so hard. They make it so easy.
I know. I have heard that hitting snooze is like one of the worst things you can do though. And I say worst in a kind of dramatic sort of like theatrical way, but
oh, you mean like Kaitlin writing in her journal as it's raining outside type of way?
Exactly what I mean. But like for as far as actually waking up, like it just doesn't serve you at all to hit snooze, even though I do it at least like 3 or 4 times every morning.
I know. It is one of the habits that I find is really, really hard for a lot of my clients to break. And I mean, I jokingly said it earlier about the baby steps. I think that's the only sustainable way that you can truly create new habits around pressing snooze is just small steps, one step at a time, gradually building so that that foundation is firm and it becomes a lasting habit. Yeah. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the other thing that's coming to mind for me right now is you mentioned Ellie. So are some of the habits that you've talked about, how have you been able to maintain them since entering motherhood?
Oh yeah. Well, we are so lucky. Ellie has been a great sleeper since about 4 months, and she's almost 15 months now. So really keeping, once I was out of the the days that is the first many months of being of having a baby, I was able to get back to that morning time for myself. And I mean, I give her props for that because if she wasn't sleeping through the night, that would have been really tough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, since being a mom, I have maintained that morning time. Something else that I've tried to do is get out of the house at least a couple times a month, even if it's for something so small. And so sometimes it could be like a treat yourself thing, and I'll go get my nails done. Or sometimes it's on a Saturday where I have a lot of work to do. And instead of working at home at my desk, my husband will stay with Ellie and I'll pack up and just go to the coffee shop that's down the street. So that's kind of like one of my happy places, like distraction free. I can really sit down and get a lot of work done. That makes me feel good, happy, productive. So yeah, I don't really know if that answered your question, but just
no, it does.
small things like that.
Yeah, no, it does. And I ask because I'm just a person who did not fully appreciate my time before I feel like the two little humans that I created have begun to take up so much of it. So
yes.
yeah. And in, I don't know, I always like to ask this too, just with your husband and, the things that you've mentioned, the journaling, the gratitude at night, like, going to your coffee shop, were these conversations, these patterns that you have, like, where does he sit with how you live? Is it like, Kaitlin, you do your thing, I'll be here? Or like, how does he, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I think that on one hand, I ask questions like this sometimes and I think, well, why does it matter? And then it does, though, because I think that for some people, yeah, I think because it's easy to think about yourself in your house and what you want to do. But there are other people there, and there are people that matter to you, and you want to either have them feel included or at least understand what you're doing and not feel like, hey, we used to spend this time together and now you're writing in a journal, So yeah.
And okay, before I answer the question, you are so good at asking questions that I feel like when your listeners are listening to your episodes, it's just like on the tip of their tongue, like, oh, if I was there, I would ask this follow-up question. And you just come in with it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, of course. Okay, so where Oakley, my husband, sits with it, he is without a doubt one of my biggest cheerleaders. So I will start by saying that. Every great cheerleader needs a break. And I've learned that I can't expect him to do everything that I'm going to want to do in regards to like habits like this. And don't get me wrong, he exercises and he takes care of himself and he is a very happy person, but it's not fair for me to, just because I've taken up journaling, to then expect him, okay, Oakley, like journaling has really helped me and it helped me be more introspective and you should pick up journaling too. It's not fair for me to do that.
Right. Or like instead of movie night, we're going to sit and write.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that would not fly because also my husband is a huge movie fanatic. He was showing me, he has an app where he's tracking all of the movies he's watched so far this year. And I'm literally like, oh my gosh, how do you have so much time to watch all these movies? He's like, well, it's something I just really enjoy doing. And I'm like, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
When you put it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's great at bringing me back down to earth too. So like say we're on a date night and we have a babysitter and we get there and we're sipping some wine or something and I start talking about my business or something like that. He's so good at being like, Kaitlin, this is date night. Let's not talk about that right now.
Right.
And I just appreciate that about him a lot. So much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, it's funny. I think that generally women, we tend to be like sort of into those sorts of things more, right? Like, this is so broad and generalized and harsh generalizations to some extent. But yeah, I feel like for the most part, I would say that my husband is a fan of anything that puts me or keeps me in a good mood and feeling good. And it could be walking on my hands across the house if I needed. He'd be like, great, you're happy, awesome.
Way to go, babe.
Right. But there is some, at least I found, sometimes it is easy for me to resist making a habit and resist making a change because I fear what that will do to our dynamic and some of the patterns that we've set up.
Yep. It's so funny you say that. Gosh, this must have just been a month or so ago. I was having a very, very similar conversation with one of my one-on-one clients. And the thing that I had first suggested, just bottom line, is open communication and telling your partner about the habit that you're wanting to create and why you're wanting to create it. And just having that open line of communication, for all you know, your husband could say like, heck yeah, that's a great idea. I think that would better our lives as a family too. And worst case scenario, maybe it's something that you decide to take a lead by example route, and maybe you have to compromise a little bit with maybe you don't get to go from
the time or the place or,
exactly
right.
exactly
or the amount of time or
yes but
no, that's good advice.
I think communication is really an important part of that.
I appreciate that. That's good advice. I mean, even sitting here for an interview at night, it at first I was like, oh, is he gonna be like mad at me that and he's not at all. Like he's doing his own thing and he's watching his shows that I don't watch, or he's working or whatever, and I think honestly he's happy to have some of the time.
No, I agree. I'm right there with you.
All right. So in mentioning a client, what does your business look like? Like, who's coming to you? What are they getting out of the experience? What does it look like to work with you as a coaching client?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I feel like the majority of people who come to me are women who feel like their life is running them instead of them running their life.
That's excellent wording for that. Yes.
Yes. And just women who feel like, they're going nonstop 24/7, 100 miles per hour, just all the time. But at the same time, they struggle with even, knowing like where to start with checking things off of their to-do list and just overwhelmed and exhausted from juggling so many things, but also deep down know that doesn't have to be how life feels. And also sometimes it's women who just are craving the glass half full perspective in their lives and who just want to, relearn simple things to help them create and live a happy life for themselves. Yeah.
So are there women meeting with you one-on-one?
Yeah.
How often and how long, and like, are you giving homework? Like what can someone expect?
Yeah. So I have both one-on-one options, and I also have some a handful of group programs. So inside the group programs would be the things like the workshop I was telling you guys about earlier. Perfect example of a group program. The one-on-one programs come in both a 4-week option and a 12-week option.
Okay.
So those look like weekly one-on-one calls. And all of it is completely personalized to you, to the client. And yes, like I have the pillars that I base a lot of what I teach off of, but no one's life is cookie cutter. Like, let's be honest, like in this line of work, I cannot go into a conversation with a client and have a script for, okay, this is call number 2 and here's my script. No, it's not like that at all. I'm really into relationships, and I'm also really into I'm very much a, if you want it, you have to work for it type of person, right? So I feel like because of that, I attract clients who are coming and just, they're ready to take action mentally. And that helps too.
Yeah. It's reminding me, I think it's Mel Robbins, where she's always just like, no one's coming. Like, you can have a coach, you can have a therapist, you can have whoever you want, but no one is coming to your bedside when the alarm goes off to rip you out of bed. Like, only you can make the changes that you want to make, Christy.
Yeah. Christy. Snooze.
I do like the baby step idea. Like, I could go from like 3 snoozes to 2.
Yes.
And then 2 to 1. Like, I could get down with that, because I've always seen it as like a rip the Band-Aid kind of thing, and it just never works.
I know. And so, okay, so here's some unsolicited advice, since we're talking about the snooze thing.
Okay, I'm so excited.
I would suggest so if you're going from 3 to 2 snoozes, I would reset all 3 of those alarms so that you're going to be forced to get out of, so like let's say you have to get out of bed by 7 o'clock. Okay. And you know, you're going to set your alarm 3 times. Press snooze 3 times. So you set your first alarm for 6:30. Okay. Easy number. Snooze is 9 minutes, but we'll say it's 10 minutes because because
I don't do math like that. Yeah.
No. So when you're working on cutting out that like snooze number 3, reset that first alarm for 6:40 so that literally you only have 2 snoozes until you have to get out of bed at 7. I have found that really helps.
Okay. All right. I'm making notes, Kaitlin.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
If you need accountability, slide straight into my DM, sister.
Oh my God. It's like, I do, but I know if I do it, you're going to be like, hi, hello. It's 7. Anyway. Okay. So one thing I did that we started to go down and then we didn't, and I want to just take it back for a second. Tell me, like, step 1, if you will, of starting to identify where I waste time. Like, how do you start this process? Because it feels like actually it could get quite involved.
Okay. Such a good question. So I have 3 steps inside of this whole process, if you will, of regaining and reallocating wasted time.
Okay.
So the 3 steps are 1, to identify your wasted time, 2, to create a game plan, and then 3, to execute your game plan. So that first step is really just all about figuring out what distracts you from productivity throughout the day. And then after you like figure out what those distractions are, determining approximately like how much time those distractions are taking away from you on a weekly basis. And that's the first step of this process, because it shows you how much time in your week you're wasting, but also have available to reallocate to different things.
Yeah.
So I give this example sometimes. When I was on that IG live today that we were talking about before we started recording, I gave an example of, so let's say your three main distractions, and most of us have way more than three distractions, but again, math. So let's say your distractions are like scrolling Pinterest, watching reruns of The Office, and online shopping.
Mhm.
So after you identify those distractions, you're going to self audit the approximate amount of time you spend per week on each of those distractions. So let's say per week you scroll Pinterest for about 10 hours. So that's a little more than 1 hour a day. And
And it
then,
could be like 10 minutes at a time throughout the day.
yes, exactly.
That's where it's tricky, I think.
It's so tricky.
Yeah.
And then, like, let's say for The Office, you watch like for 15 hours a week, which literally is 3 episodes, 5 days a week, which is totally something that a lot of us would do. Like, it feels like nothing. They're 30-minute episodes. Oh, yeah, I can watch one more. Bam, 15 hours in a week. And then the third thing, online shopping, say just 5 hours a week you spend doing that. So if you add all of that up, that's 30 hours a week of time that you're scrolling Pinterest, watching The Office, and online shopping. That is more than an entire day
Yeah.
from your week, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny because as you're talking, what I'm trying to figure out, and this is where I'm sure participating in the workshop is beneficial, is that because, you know, it doesn't, we're not, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not saying that watching The Office in general is a waste of time. It's like your husband likes watching movies. He has an app to track how many.
Exactly.
But it's intentionally doing something that he enjoys rather than sort of where I'm coming to is seems to be an element of mindlessness.
Yes. You put it perfectly. Yes.
It's not like, hey, like I'm gonna say for me, I like watching Real Housewives, so I'm gonna watch the new episode this week, but I'm not gonna sit there and watch 3 reruns that I've already seen. Like that's where I'm trying to, like I can't ever say that watching New Jersey Housewives is a waste of time.
Exactly.
You know.
Well, and it's something that you look forward to each week.
Okay.
And,
yeah.
you know, it's time for you. It's time for yourself. And, you know,
you have
part
to
of the workshop.
differentiate. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And part of the workshop walks you through, you know, I am all about like sustaining habits, right? And so nothing that I teach is like, go big or go home, eat no sugar for the rest of your life. That's not the approach that I take. So with this whole concept of regaining and reallocating wasted time, it's not designed to teach you to never scroll on Pinterest or to never watch Housewives. It's designed to help you be mindful of the time that you are spending on those things. And sure, if you realize that you don't like spending 10 hours of your week scrolling Pinterest, let's work on cutting that back to 7 hours a week first. Yeah. And then maybe we're going to work on cutting it back to 6 hours or 5 hours a week. Yeah. Not totally cutting it out of your life. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, so I was feeling like, okay, how do I differentiate? And then, but I do see such value in really having that assessment because, yeah, I think a lot of the habits, at least in my experience, or a lot of, at least, not the habits, but the like waste of time, I guess, isn't necessarily these big chunks of time. In fact, I can guarantee they're not. I don't ever feel like I have big chunks of time. So
exactly.
It's like, yeah, it's like 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. They just start to add up, and I can totally see how that happens.
Yeah.
And I can see how I'm able to justify it better in that way.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all just, you know, stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And just like little loopholes that we create for ourselves. But I think that that's why doing that self-audit of the amount of time per week you spend on those distractions, it just brings awareness to it. If nothing else, it brings awareness to it. And I like using a week as the time frame for that, because if you just do a day, first of all, your days are going to vary most likely.
Right.
A Monday or a Tuesday is going to look different than a Friday or a Saturday.
Mhm.
But if you just do a day, and if you're only watching The Office for an hour and a half each day, that doesn't really feel like that much.
Right.
It's just an hour and a half. But then if you add that to 5 days a week or whatever it might be, that's where the numbers really start to impact you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. I could see that. That makes sense. Okay. All right. And I know you could probably continue down that that road
Yes,
for much longer,
again,
but
more warning signs.
yes,
I'm like
yes.
flashing my fingers in the air right now. Warning, warning. Could talk for hours.
I do want to give you a minute here to tell us about your podcast, though. We're coming to time. So
Oh,
tell me
yes.
about the Think Happy podcast and what it's all about.
Yes. Okay. So the Think Happy podcast is, again, not creatively named because, we're going to call it good branding.
It is. It is. Hey, it's effective.
Um, so my show is split 50-50 with interview episodes and solo episodes. Solo episodes are literally just me teaching and talking about things, teaching my listeners about regaining wasted time, setting boundaries and how to sustain boundaries. Let's see here. What are some of my other favorite solo episodes? Uh, creating sustainable New Year's resolutions that you're actually going to stick with was a really fun one to write about or talk about. So those are what the solo episodes focus on. A lot of teaching, a lot of education.
Okay.
The interview episodes are a lot of conversations like we've just had, honestly. I bring on women and we talk about things, happiness things that real life women deal with, right? So, one of my favorite episodes is with my friend named Ada, and we talked about creating healthy friendships as adults. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier in this episode, I just recorded one with a local doctor here in Houston, and we talked all about just like what self-care actually is, and not the like treat yourself mentality, how that's different than what true self-care is, and just being in tune with your body and your mind and what it needs from you. Let's see here. What are some other of the episodes? Oh, we just did one about happiness and being authentic on social media. So yeah, really a wide range of topics, but all of it just stems back to really the core of what Think Happy Co is about, which is just regaining happiness in your life and sustaining that and being intentional and being in the driver's seat of your life and not giving that driver's seat up to someone else or something else.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And I had this question written down and I had sent it to you. And
Yeah.
at this point now, I think I could answer it, but I wonder if you had any other thoughts on Think Happy and what some would consider toxic positivity.
Yes, I sure do.
Yeah. No, good. I mean, I want you to address it because I think, at least me, when I see someone just like, hey, like just be happy, and I can so clearly identify and see now that that's not what you're doing. So I don't want to but if you have thoughts, I would be curious because this is your world and this is your what you do.
Yeah. So I think of toxic positivity. Okay, there's these reels right now that I'm sure you've seen. I see them all the time on my feed. They're the ones where like the camera will pan to like a beautiful living room or like a beautiful kitchen and it's all clean and organized and perfectly put together. And the text says something along the lines of, I don't know who needs to hear this, dot, dot, dot. And then the next clip is the camera panning on like that same beautiful room, but it's a mess and laundry's piled and toys are everywhere, pillows on the floor, dishes in the sink. And the text on that clip says, but Instagram is not real life. So I think that positivity is really similar to that. It's really, really easy to put on a facade for the world to see. And like, it's not tough to fake it, especially in the world of social media where people only see what we choose to allow them to see. But I think if you're faking it on the outside, you are definitely not feeling it on the inside. And it's just a matter of time before those outside feelings start just melting away that facade. And before you know it, it's just totally faded. So I guess with all that being said, creating positivity in your life, I don't think is something that can be done overnight. And I'm sure you're like, oh my gosh, here she goes again with baby steps.
No, not at all.
But it takes just ongoing effort. And it's just like working out. So if you're in a good exercise routine, you feel yourself getting stronger and more confident in the movements you're doing and just better at them in general. But then when you stop that routine, you gradually start going back to square one. But to keep the momentum going, you need to keep at that exercise routine. So I think that that's how positivity is, how happiness is. It's not something that like you get to the top and you've achieved it and then it's going to be there for the rest of forever.
Right.
No, it's a continual mindset. It's being intentional day in and day out. It just takes ongoing work.
Yeah. And I think at this point the conversation's come full circle because you started by saying, your friends would say, like, how are you always so happy? And you said, I'm not, but I work at it. And I think for me, toxic positivity is a lot of times when you see just using, going off of what you said with social media, it's like the idea that if you just are, it's like when people just post a picture of a rainbow and say, like, be happy. It's like, it's like you said, it's actually exactly what you said. It's not that simple and it doesn't happen overnight. You work at it. But also that for me, there has to be the element of, and it's okay and normal to not be happy all of the time. Like,
for sure.
We're going to struggle. Like, that's part of life and we have to feel the feels.
Exactly. So the listeners know, Christy and I had our interview scheduled for last week, and I had such a crummy week. I was crying just like almost every single day.
Oh no.
And it was just like, it wasn't one big thing. It was just like a lot of small stuff. And I was just feeling all the feels. And it's not healthy to expect yourself to constantly be on this high of always happy and always just this huge smile on your face. And my glass is always half full and the sun is always shining. And that's just not realistic and definitely not sustainable. And I mean, sometimes to appreciate those moments of pure bliss and just happiness and the smallest things, you have to have been able to also feel what it's like at the other end of that spectrum. And it's just being honest with yourself.
Yeah, I just aired an episode with Michelle Dempsey, and she talked about when she started medication for her anxiety, and she talked about having walked the same couple of blocks in her neighborhood for years. And I mean, her point was more about medication and how it helps, but just that after starting the medication, like one of the first walks she took on that same path, all of a sudden she was like, wow, those flowers are so beautiful. And the wind feels so nice in the sun.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, you know, like I didn't appreciate, she just couldn't, I mean, she couldn't see it. And I've lost my train of thought now on how this connected to what you were saying.
No, it's so true though.
Oh, the feeling of, yes, of sorry, of feeling like so anxious that she couldn't even enjoy a walk.
Yeah.
To then get to a point where she could and was able to appreciate such small sort of everyday aspects of life.
Oh,
know?
Yeah. Just like the beauty of the world that's around you. And yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I will tell your listeners, I take medication for anxiety. I am never one day going to pretend like I don't.
Yeah.
Because I do. And it's just part of who I am. I use it as one of many tools. But yeah, if I would definitely support someone if they're on the fence and if they've talked to doctors and stuff.
Yeah, same.
Nothing wrong with it.
I take them too. So we're
Yep.
all in the same club,
Yes.
whatever club that is. Oh my goodness.
The Honest with Ourself Club.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's a great name for our club.
Yes.
I
The
love
founding
that.
members.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love
And
that
we
so
can
much.
invite Michelle to be a founding member with us.
Oh my God, I would die to have Michelle to be a founding member with us. And it all stemmed from her walk in the park. It's so great.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, Kaitlin, I have kept you over time now. Is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with, or anything at all that you would want to mention that I didn't think to ask you?
Well, honestly, all I have to say is thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all of your questions. And thanks to the listeners for giving me some of their ear real estate on whenever they're listening to this. I really do feel honored to have been part of your show. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This was amazing. Thank you. So much fun, right? The story about her first journal entry, I think that was my version of You Had Me at Hello with Kaitlin. Like, so relatable. I could totally put myself in her shoes, picture myself doing that, and I just thought it was hysterical. And so, I said to Kaitlin on air that I don't typically think of myself or my brand as happiness, right? And I've also spent a lot of time learning how important it is to feel all the feelings, not just, be happy all the time or strive to be happy all the time. So I honestly wasn't sure what to expect in getting to know Kaitlin. But as you heard, and what I came to understand, is Kaitlin's definition of happiness as being intentionality. And then when you combine that with her vulnerability and sharing her own struggles, that is the realness that we all want and need. Kaitlin has that spark, that vibe that, as she said, prompts people to ask her, how are you so happy all the time? And it's like, I think that's a lot of her innate personality, but I love that she embodies the happiness, but knows that in order to do that other feelings need to coexist with the happiness. So I don't know. I just dig her personality because it feels so opposite of mine. But I also truly appreciate the time that she's taken to, almost what I want to say is that she's taken her personality and almost put it in step-by-step form. And maybe that's overstepping. Maybe that's I don't mean to diminish the work she's done on herself, and I know that she has done a lot of it. So I don't know. She just is bubbly. I don't know, but it's valuable. It's so valuable, the tools and the steps and the strategies that she's put together. I have pages of notes. I hope you do too. Everything from how to journal, how to identify wasted time, movement, learning about the 5 signature pillars for taking care of ourselves. It's all so good. And so I will leave you with, if you want to join our non-existent but just fun club of what did we call it? The Honest with Yourself Club. Please reach out, slide into our DMs, say hello. And in the meantime, make sure to check out Kaitlin's podcast, her social media, website, her book. All of it is linked in the show notes. That's all I got. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.